We're talking about personal philosophies or philosophy statements. I think there are really two kinds. So first of all, there's the kind that you might type up in order to get a job, and you're really concerned about writing what you think they're expecting you to hear. And so that would just be kind of you can find those kinds of examples online, and maybe it is what they want to hear, but it's not necessarily something that is a guide for you. So the other kind of philosophy statement, and I always have my philosophy in writing in some form or another, that kind of philosophy statement is what guides the choices that you make in and outside of the classroom. So for me, I believe that that philosophy, that kind of philosophy statement is very, very unique to you. It should be all about your own personal experiences and how they have formed the way that you see the world. And that goes into the choices that you make, because you'll use that as a foundation for making those decisions, curricular decisions, pedagogical decisions. And those are going to evolve over time. So where mine came from is that I just had this really wild kind of background. I was born, and a lot of you know this, because that first day of class, I'll often say a lot about myself so that you know who I am, because you know that I'm reaching for paper here. You know that I want to get to know you. And so it's important for me to know, for you to know who I am. So I was born into pretty extreme poverty up in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Southwest Virginia. And so I automatically have this connection with people who struggle, because we were very poor, even when my family moved to the Panhandle of Florida when I was in elementary school. My dad worked construction. My mom was a piano teacher. We didn't have a lot of money, but they worked very hard and put my brother and myself through a private school. So we have this work ethic, this independence that comes from that mountain background. So my teaching experience happened kind of as an accident. I fell into public education, not because I intended to. I started out as a piano performance major, but I fell into public education and I loved it. But almost all of my teaching in public schools was in inner city areas, urban areas, including downtown Detroit, always with a high percentage of students who are identified as at risk. And so the way that I look at music teaching and learning is that if I can come from this hillbilly mountain kind of background in extreme poverty and wind up teaching at the University of North Texas, anybody can do just about anything, as long as they have the doors open for them, right? My parents opened those doors for me by sending me to a public school and making sure I had a great academic background before I went away to college. So I look at what I do in the classroom as opening doors and helping students see that there are things that they can be successful at. Because a lot of times in those urban settings, those inner city settings, those kids often are not successful academically through no fault of their own. They're smart, they're bright. It's just that the system is kind of skewed against them, right? So music is something that they can excel at. And if I can show them that they can excel at music, oftentimes that kind of transfers over into other areas as well. So I'm looking at my most recent printed philosophy statement about the choices that I make, the principles that I've developed that have come out of my own background. I believe strongly in empowering people to be as self-actualized as they possibly can. I want people to recognize their gifts and their strengths. I don't want them to focus on what they are not good at. I want them to figure out what they're good at and build on that. I also believe it's really important to give students the opportunity to reflect and to think critically. So that is a principle that's very important to me. I think that we should be able to experience our humanness to the greatest extent possible as well. And so I think that having this push for excellence is connected to that. So I'm always going to push my students to do their best. You know, in my syllabi, I often say, are you going to wade? Are you going to snorkel? Are you going to scuba dive? You know, you can get an A and still wade, but push yourself for that excellence. The other thing I think is so important is self-expression. And that's something that we lack so often. So these are all like these big overarching principles, but how I put them into play in my classrooms comes into very specific things. So I want to be a good musical model for all of my students. I want to be a good model to be human, that's for sure. I want to provide experiences for students to think critically. I want to provide opportunities for them to become independent thinkers. And I want to provide opportunities for them to make that transition from ensemble member to leader of the ensemble. So you know I'm going to have you practice teaching in all my classes. You're either going to get in front of the class, or right now we're taking turns on Zoom, you know, leading songs. Let's see, to share my own joy of music making and teaching, because it is a joy for me. And the big joy right now is I get to teach this class. It's Music Ed 2, and that's all I have to do. I don't have meetings. I don't have an office. I don't have committees. I don't have anything else. It's like what I wanted forever. Just let me teach. So that, Dan, you're going to be very jealous of that. Let's see. I like to weave in other areas of thinking, like arts, like photography, like psychology. I like to include all that, sociology. I like to make students aware of the importance of being engaged with their community. And for the self-expression part, I'm always going to push them toward improvisation and then toward composition. So I think it's really important for anybody in their developing their philosophy statement is to look at your own background and see what's really, really important to you and kind of why you are the way that you are. And then look at these big principles or categories and then think in each one of those, how can I put that into practice in my classroom? And I'll tell you, if you print up a philosophy statement and go in and hand that to somebody when you're looking for a job, they're going to be much more impressed that your statement is all about who you are and not what you think they want to hear, right? So if any of you are interested in working on your own philosophy statement or how you can do that, and people in 3100, we will do that, just let me know and I can help you with that. But I hope that gives you an idea of, I mean, most of you guys have been in my classes. So I hope that gives you an idea of why I choose to do the things that I do. You know, as this like mountain culture that I have, it means that I'm innately kind of an introvert. That might not be well known to you, but I am. And so it's very important to me to put myself out there and help my students put themselves out there as well. So yeah, I think that's like the gist of it. That covers most of where my philosophy comes from and why I make the choices I do in my classrooms. That whole topic is really, really important for us right now because, first of all, like just this past week, there was a former student who had posted something on Facebook about how exhausted she is, how she didn't feel like she was doing what she needed to be doing with her students because she's like pulled in all these different directions, you know, face-to-face teaching and online teaching, and was disappointed in herself. And I'm like, okay, here's where vulnerability comes in for us right now, and that is to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't have this. Like lots of people responded to her, you're a great teacher, you've got this. Well, no, we don't got this. We're in this really weird time, and all we can do is our best. And I know in some of my classes, I've mentioned a book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of those agreements, and it's like a kind of a life philosophy. One of those agreements is you always do your best, knowing that your best fluctuates from moment to moment to moment. So if your best is typically up here and you're sick, you can't do that. You do the best that you can do in that moment. And right now we are all in this huge challenging moment. And it is likely that you're not going to be able to do the best that you're normally used to doing. So you have to be vulnerable enough to say, okay, I know that I can't hold myself to my usual standards. So let me take a breath. Let me do the best that I can. Let me take care of myself mentally and physically. And that's being vulnerable in the moment right now, and allowing our students to see us be vulnerable is really, really important, because it's modeling for them what vulnerability is all about. If you've been in a recent class with me, you know that I've kind of worked out this process, and vulnerability is like the second step in the process. The first step in the process is to become friends with our fears. So all of you in Music Ed 1 who did the Post-it note thing, I passed out Post-it notes and you wrote down what your fears were and we stuck them on the wall, and then we all looked at them, and you realized almost everybody is afraid of the same things. We're afraid to fail. We're afraid to let somebody down. We're afraid we're like going to look dumb. You know, we're all afraid of the same things. So know that as a teacher, you're always learning yourself. So earlier classes that I did that exercise in, know that that led me to develop this process that vulnerability is a part of. So becoming friends with your fears, because you can never overcome them. They're always going to be there. You just have to go, okay, hi fear, I know you're there, well, whatever. Then that allows us to be vulnerable, because we can't be vulnerable as long as we're afraid. So once we become vulnerable, then we're willing to take risk. Because vulnerability means you're not so tied to the outcome. You know, I'm vulnerable, I'm going to put this out here. It might go the way I think, it might not. I don't know how it's going to go. So that's what being vulnerable is you just put yourself out there. You take those risks. And over time, as you take risk, that allows you to be creative. You can never be creative unless you're willing to take risk. You can't take risk unless you're willing to be vulnerable, and you can't be vulnerable unless you become friends with your fears. So that's a process that's just kind of become, you know, it's kind of like I uncovered it as over the years that I've taught. And we would do the fears thing, and then I go, well, this isn't getting me to where we need to get. And so that's kind of how I developed that. So some other things about vulnerability that are really, really important is you have to give up the stories that limit you. And those are the stories that you tell yourself, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not enough, right? I'm not lovable enough. Those are all stories that we have learned and that we tell ourselves and that limit us. So you got to give that stuff up, guys. You know, you can't hang on to those stories. And also you have to give up trying to meet other people's expectations. You have to decide who you are, what's important to you, and then you have to make your choices based on what's important to you. that's always difficult when you have parents that are always going to tell you what they expect. But you get to a point where you have to kind of set those aside or not worry about them so much. Yes, we're going to let our parents down. We're going to let our friends down sometimes. That's just life. But don't be so tied to trying to be the person that other people think you ought to be. Gosh, if I could have learned that before I was 50, my life would have been way better. Let's see. Yes, be easy, do your best, take a breath. You know what? There is nothing normal right now. There is no normal. So be vulnerable enough to realize that there is no normal. Be vulnerable enough to figure out who your true self is, who you are at your core, and then be vulnerable enough to take the risk to try to be that person. And that's when, oh my gosh, your creative juices will start to flow then. And it's not only in the realm of musicianship, right? It's in how we see the world. You have to understand that my experience was very unique. So I did not have a degree in music education when I took my first public school teaching job. I had a degree in humanities interdisciplinary, in 2 years as a piano performance major and a vocal minor. But I had a Yamaha music school, and one of my adult students was a principal of this elementary school that was turning into a magnet school, and that's just like a whole story in itself. So I kind of fell by accident into teaching. So I did not student teach. I went right into an inner city school that was a performing arts magnet school. And it was their first year of performing arts. And it's largely why I'm gray now, because after 2 weeks of that first fall semester, we put on a major production with 250 kids in it. And how we pulled that off, I do not know. There was me, there was a dance instructor, a drama instructor, and a visual art instructor. And it was like the most exhilarating and also the most exhausting thing I had ever done. So my experience did not include student teaching. So I actually wrote down some things. I did not know how exhausting it was going to be. It is exhausting, guys. Student teaching is exhausting. You start taking your vitamins before you start student teaching, because you're going to be tired, and those middle school and elementary germs are ones that you don't know and your body doesn't have resistance to. I did not know that I should take care of myself. I've always been like immersed in my teaching. It's all about the students, and it should be as much as possible all about the students. But you can't do that at the expense of your own health, whether it's mental health or physical health or emotional health. So there's this very fine line that you have to dance around, where you become close to your students and you build relationships with your students, but you also have to take care of yourself so all of your energy doesn't get sucked out of you because you've got a gazillion students who all need you and you're not taking care of yourself. I had no clue how that worked. I did not understand that I could not be all things to all people. I could not keep everybody happy. And that's another one of my traits, is I'm a people pleaser. I like to, everything needs to be copacetic. I don't like, contention. Well, forget that. You cannot make everybody happy. And then probably the most important thing for me, and what led into my focus in my graduate work, is I did not know a thing about other cultures. I did not know how to be aware of other cultures. I didn't know that kids from other cultures would have different values, that would like different things. They would express themselves differently. They would have different behaviors. And I'm not talking just about race and ethnicity, but I'm talking about socioeconomic level, because people who come from poor backgrounds have different worldviews than kids who come from very well-off communities and backgrounds, different religions, different parts of the country. Like I grew up in the Panhandle of Florida. When I moved to Michigan and said y'all, they thought I was a hick for sure, you know? So I wish I had known a lot more about intercultural competence, and that became the topic of my doctoral dissertation, because what happened was I wound up creating conflict in my classes because I expected kids to behave the way that I expected them to. I like this music. Why don't you like it? This is good music. You know, I just had such limited expectations because I didn't understand that. So it's one of the reasons that I'm really proud that Dr. Henry and I had that study abroad course for 12 years, because that was my focus on, you know, on that curriculum. And then we got to go to another country and see very different cultures and experience very different cultures. So if there's any way that you can gain some knowledge in intercultural competence, not multicultural education, no, not culturally relevant pedagogy, no. Those are all wonderful things, but I'm talking about intercultural competence. And any of you who are interested in that, you can message me on Facebook and I can give you some resources on that. So I think that's the most important thing, in addition to just taking care of yourself. You're going to get sick, guys. Try not to get sick. Okay, you're making an assumption that I like teaching in the collegiate environment, right? Actually, I love teaching at the university level. I love my undergrad students. I love my graduate students. I also like to get on the floor with 4- and 5-year-olds, you know, and that's kind of my zen. I think that the big differences in those students and the big differences in how you have to adapt your instruction is that younger kids are more open to almost anything. They are not inhibited until they get to like 3rd or 4th grade. But college students already have their worldviews kind of set. So if I want to try to challenge your thinking, if I want to try to get you to see things from a different perspective, it's really easy to do that with 2nd graders. It's really difficult to do it with graduate students, really difficult. Less difficult to do it with undergraduate students, because the older we are, the more set in our thinking we become. So that's a big thing. College students are much more inhibited. Little kids are not. If I say, let's dance around the room, you know, college kids are going to go, what? I'm not going to dance around the room, right? But we wind up dancing around the room. Little kids are much more open to take a risk because they're not afraid to fail until they get, like I say, like 3rd or 4th grade and the standardized testing kicks in, and then they're really afraid to fail. But college students are really afraid to fail. So it's much harder to get you guys to try to take risk, whether it's like creating your own cover song. Some of you will remember that, and the current class will know what I'm talking about because we're working on that right now. You know, so college students can do way more musically, right? They've studied privately. They've been in great programs. In order to get into UNT, they have to be really good at their instrument. But what I've discovered, particularly here in Texas, is that college students tend to be great technicians and not great musicians, because they're often told, this is how you play this music. I want you to play it exactly this way. And you're not given, by and large, there's always exceptions to this, you're not given the opportunity to make the music your own or to express yourself in some way or to make it more musical. Little kids, man, you put them in front of a xylophone and they just go to town, and it's really free form and musical, and they'll experiment with dynamics, and you guys want to do it, you know, like even if I said, I want you to write an essay just so that I can see what your writing is like. So I want you to write an essay about anything. I will have students say, what do you want me to write about? And I'll go, I don't care. You write what you want about. Yeah, but what do you want me to write about? You know, it's like, yeah, they want to do just the right thing. But here's some things that I think are important to keep in mind. Your teaching techniques are going to be the same, no matter what level you're at, no matter what setting you're in. It can be high school orchestra, middle school band, or elementary, or, you know, the top choir, or whatever. But the things to remember are the importance of nonverbal communication and nonverbal instruction. Taylor Gaskins just posted, some of you guys know her, just posted a thing on Facebook, like, thank you, Dr. Emmanuel, to exaggerate and to do all that stuff. And then I posted, you know what? Because we're wearing these masks, eyebrows are more important than ever now, right? So nonverbal communication is very, very important. Positive reinforcement. You know, I like how you guys finish that phrase off so cleanly. Is a whole lot more effective than, okay, you guys were closer that time, but it needs to be, you know, so positive reinforcement. Exaggeration and theatrics, and we're talking about that in the current class. And theatrics doesn't necessarily mean that you're wah ha ha ha, but it means that you put on a hat. You know, you have to put on a hat and take on a role, and it's always contextual what kind of theatrics are demanded in a particular setting for you to keep your students engaged. And sometimes putting on that hat is because you have had an awful experience and you don't want that to rub off on your kids. So at the door, you suck it up, you put on the hat, you put on the smile, you go in and you're excited to be there. So that's the same across the board. Building relationships, the same everywhere. You do whatever you have to do to build relationships. You know all of your students' names. You use them all the time. You figure out who they are as people. You spend time with them. Also creating a safe space for them. And that, of course, is going to look different depending on the grade level, but it's the same across the board. All students need a place where they feel safe, they feel valued, they feel welcomed, they feel loved. Modeling for them what you want them to do. If you're a band director on that podium, you're not going to say, okay, at measure 13, I want you to have this great big crescendo there. No, you're going to pick up your horn or your instrument or your violin or whatever and show them what you want. You're going to model for them all the time. So yeah, you still need to keep your musician chops up, you know, even once you're not performing like you do on juries and recitals here. And then the last thing that I think is important across the board is to keep your students on their toes. And there would be so many times when I would come into a class and I would have my lesson plan, but just from the vibe of the class, I'd go, okay, everybody's feeling under the weather today. Everybody's tired. I'm going to pitch this first thing I was going to do, and I'm going to do something else. Or every class period I come in, I would start it a different way. I would have them do something bizarre, or, you know, and I just think that is novel and refreshing, and it keeps your students engaged. So even while there are differences, huge differences developmentally between little kids and you guys, there are these teaching strategies and pedagogical techniques that we're going to use across the board in every single setting. That's a really tough one because, like everything, it's contextual, right? So are you teaching face-to-face? Are you teaching online? Are you having to do this hybrid thing where some of them are face-to-face and then, you know, some of them go online? Are you doing both at once? I think right now, and this is what I'm doing in my own class, it's not that your expectations change so much. You still want to expect excellence, but you're not as demanding as you usually are. So I'm not going to give as many assignments as I typically do. Right now in 3100, we're talking about mental health issues. I don't normally talk about that in 3100. I might do it in Music Ed 1, but I think that's really important right now is to understand everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's feeling anxious. Everyone's feeling depressed because you're all cooped up and you can't hug people like you normally do. So I think if it doesn't matter who you are right now. If you're a student and you feel like your teacher is overloading you, I think it's really important for us to shift in what we're demanding of our students. They're stressed to the max. And so if you're going into student teaching, or if you're teaching already, if you're a practicing teacher out there, be gentle, be kind to your students, be kind to yourself. Know that you're not going to make the same musical progress that you normally make. You've got to change your own mindset about what's possible right now. And also that means that you open up your mind to what else might be possible. Something outside the box. Like how many of you are using some kind of app or software where people can make music together online? People can record and then put things together. We're using Cyborg Llama. We're experimenting with that in my class right now. So yeah, be gentle. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with your students. If you feel like they just need half an hour to talk, then just take a half hour to talk. And I think you'll find that if you do that, they're going to be more motivated to do a little bit of work, but they have to be rested. They have to have their head in the right place, and it's almost impossible right now. So if you're a practicing teacher, be nice to everybody, including yourself. Back off. Don't push to do the same musical things that you typically would do. You're making whole new lesson plans. You're making whole new rehearsal plans because you can't make the same progress, and it's just not going to happen. But do you want to include something about social justice issues? Do you want to include something about working with kids with special needs? Do you want to, do something different than you typically do? And I think that's a way to challenge ourselves and kind of make the best out of a not so fun situation. We all have these high expectations for ourselves and for our students. So I ask 3100 today, is this too much? Do you think this is too much to do by Tuesday? I'm going to ask, and I'm going to expect them to be honest with me. If they think it's not too much, to say, no, it's not too much. Instead of copping out and going, no, it's way too much. So yeah, be nice. Good God, retirement is great. It's also strange because, yes, you just said you miss seeing me. I miss seeing people. And I was just on campus the other day, and there was hardly anyone in the music building. And I know times are weird now, but I miss interacting with students and colleagues. My music ed colleagues and some of the theory colleagues as well are some of my best buds, and Zoom doesn't get it. I miss all of that. And it's very difficult as well, I'm finding, to not have a schedule because I have class on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and then there's not a whole lot else that's like things that I have to do. So the first month was just kind of lost. Like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. So it's a big transition, but it's like any other transition we have in our lives. It's like you have to figure out who you're going to be when you grow up. Like, I'm still asking myself that question, like, who do I want to be when I grow up? Oh my gosh. Now I have more options. But the transition from high school to college or into student teaching, that's a tough transition, or student teaching to actual teaching, that's a tough transition. So it's just another, it's another transition that you just get used to. But the cool thing is that my blood pressure has dropped. I sleep all night long, which is so completely novel. Like I can go to bed at 11 o'clock and wake up at 9, and I've slept the whole night. That hasn't happened in decades and decades. So I think for my mental health, it's been awesome. For my physical health, it's been awesome. I've been eating better. I've been working out more. I've been taking care of myself better. But good Lord, thank goodness that they said, Dr. Emmanuel, can we hire you as an adjunct this fall to teach one class? Because it just kind of, it's like, yeah, it's easing me away. And as long as they want me to teach one course as an adjunct, I think I'll do it because I love it. I love teaching, and I miss that, and I miss the interaction. So that's really odd. But retirement is a great thing. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Just that I love you all and I miss you. I will dream about you guys. I have dreams about you guys. They're all good. They're all great. Yeah, I just miss you a lot. And so this is really, really awesome that I get to see and hear from some people that I haven't seen in a while. So that's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, and let's actually, everybody, go ahead, if you can, turn on your video. Let's see everyone's faces now. Thank you for having us, but it's great. Yay, everybody's there.
Oh my gosh, this is so wholesome.
Amber, this is really cool. Hi, Kevin. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is really cool. Lauren Coker. I'm seeing so many cool faces. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you guys for being here. Eddie Segala. Holy mackerel. He might have just locked out. Oh, there you are. Hi, Eddie. It's really good to see you guys.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead to our Q&A. Let's start off with Martin. What's your question?
So you were talking about, here, let me go back to it, because you were talking about taking care of yourself, especially when when you've got all your students and everything.
Yeah.
What do you do whenever you have to take care of yourself, let's say mentally or physically, however, but you're in the middle of your students needing you, like they need you for, whatever it may be, being a music teacher. They need you.
Right. That's a really hard shot to call, right? Because you're there for them. And this is where I really almost burnt myself out several times because I didn't say enough. So what I would do is, you guys have to realize that your faculty members have probably have busier schedules than you do. So it's like, it never gets easier, guys. It always gets tougher. The rewards are just different. So there was one semester where I kept a time log, and I had a sheet of paper, a notebook. I had a little notebook that I just carried with me all the time. And every 15 minutes, I jotted down what I was doing. Now, if I was sleeping, of course, I didn't wake myself up every 15 minutes, but every 15 minutes. And so after, 4 or 5 days of a time log, and I'd always have some weekdays and some weekend days, I would sit down and categorize everything. So here's the time I spent talking to my family. Here's the time I spent practicing. Here's the time I spent grading papers. Here's the time I spent doing all this stuff. Here's the time I spent with students in my office. And once I categorized all of that out, I could see exactly where I was spending all my time. And when you see exactly where you're spending all your time, you find out you spend way more time on Facebook than you need to, or playing games or whatever. And there's always ways that you can juggle things around. So I would adjust how I was spending my time, and where I would create time for me to do something for me. And maybe it was just a 15-minute walk, you know, where I could just go clear my head. Sometimes that's all you need. So I would highly recommend keeping a time log, and just, you can see then exactly where your time is going, because once you get burnt out or you get overwhelmed, you're no good for your students. You know, you're not patient with them. You're not able to think creatively with them. And so it's like, you have to take care of yourself in order to be able to care for them. So I would highly recommend doing a time log. Does that help?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Because sometimes we forget, you know, to take care of ourselves. We're too busy doing this and that, or, you know, be with our family. But yeah, that helps a lot.
And I will say that family, man, that's like the most important thing there is. So you can never shortchange your family for your students. Sorry, students, but that's the way it is. Your family's most important. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you very much, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I have a question. You can hear me, right?
I can hear you just fine. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Good.
Student teaching. It's been really cool so far.
Oh, my goodness.
So you can feel free to answer this however you want. Do you think that this situation we're in is kind of the universe's way of getting us to be more empathetic and dig deeper?
Personally, yes. We could have a conversation about that for sure. I just think that things happen for a reason. That's my own personal outlook. And this is the first time that something has happened like this globally. And I think it's a big wake-up call for us to look at what's going on in our own backyard, look at what's going on in our country, across the world, and to make better choices. So that's what I'm trying to do anyway. That was a great question. We can talk about it later. It's good to see you. Good luck with student teaching.
Yeah, thanks.
Allie.
You talked about,
it's good to see you.
I know, it's great to see you too. So I'm in my first year teaching right now. I teach at the high school level, and I'm not in charge. I have admin I have to answer to. I have a head director I have to follow. So how do I try and incorporate those ideas of keeping things fun and making those ideas of making music matter more, because we have the time, when I can't make those decisions for the program? We still have to do things for UIL and answer to principals and football games. Like, that still exists. So how am I supposed to try and incorporate those ideas of being easier on students?
First of all, you're in an impossible situation, and I'm so sorry for you and everybody who they're first year teachers this year. This should never, ever happen to you. Yeah, there's not a whole lot you can do. It depends on how your relationship is with your head director. So if you get along with that head director, okay, you can sometimes go, hey, there was this thing that we did at UNT and you have to have a musical goal, right? It has to be something related to music, but it could be some kind of improvisation thing, or if you want to talk about it later, I can give you some ideas. But you can go, hey, there was this thing we did. I'd love to try it out. I mean, do you think it would be okay if I just tried this one thing out? And a lot of times when you ask their permission, they'll say, yeah, sure. But again, it depends on what your relationship is like with that head director. And if that head director is being pushed by the administration to keep everything status quo, you're not going to get real far. And you just have to keep your sanity. And that's one reason why I advise students to student teach in the fall, so that you graduate in December and you spend that first semester subbing, and you go into a gazillion districts and you find where you mesh the best. And the thing is, Allie, you don't have to stay where you are. I mean, that's another thing that we're so afraid that, oh my God, you know, I'm going to take the first job I get offered because I might not get offered another one. Or you feel like you're compelled to stay there. You know, you can make pretty good money just subbing for a semester and shopping around. So don't ever feel like you're locked into a place if you cannot philosophically agree with the people that you're subordinate to. And yeah, you're just going to have fun with yourself. You know, you're going to have to go home, go buy yourself flowers, you know, go play your instrument, go sing, go do some things for fun, but maybe don't do something without asking permission, but maybe try asking permission for just one little activity. Don't show them up too bad. Don't have too much fun, right? But that might work. That might work. It's tough. You're going to have a tough year. And sometimes you just got to say, it's going to be tough. There's no sugarcoating it. It's hard. But talk to me later. You know, message me on Facebook if you want some ideas, okay?
Any other questions? You can put in the chat or unmute yourself to ask. You probably have enough time for a couple.
Oh, come on, guys. You can ask anything. Sam Flippin. What kind of story do you want me to tell, Sam?
Your choice.
Oh, there you are. Hi. Hi, Cello Boy. It's really wonderful to see you.
It's good to see you too. I miss you.
I miss you as well. Okay, so I'm going to tell a personal story right now about, let's see, about 2 months ago, I got on a dating website and I've met a great guy. It's only been a month, so the jury's out, but he's a musician. Okay, don't make fun. He's a drummer. What am I going to say? Percussionist. Crazy, wacky percussionist. There you go. So I was vulnerable enough to put myself out there online, you know, and then go out on a meet and greet. And man, that whole dating online thing is just freaking exhausting. But we'll see how it goes. So that's a story from right now, Sam. Will that suffice? It's good to see you. Let's talk later, okay? Yeah.
I love that for you. I feel this too. That's awesome. Good for you.
Can I ask one thing? I know I'm not technically in this group.
Hi, Ben.
How's it going?
You are in the group.
It's so good to see you. I couldn't help but hop on here because I just miss you. And I respect you a ton. My question has to do with what you were saying earlier about if you have a personality that's more of like a peacemaker personality, which I am. My Enneagram is a peacemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to try to initiate change and you want to try to move things forward. How do you, I guess in your experience, how have you been most successful in initiating change, but also like dealing with like the consequences of this may cause some conflict and like that kind of inner, I guess, fear of confrontation or conflict, and like, because that is part of like change, but then at the same time for me, like it's hard because I am like a peacemaker, like you were saying, and like those of us that have that kind of personality component, it is hard to really like make change. And I just am interested to hear what you would have to say on that.
So you're talking about change in your classes with your students? You're talking about change at the university level? Or are you talking about change in the world? Because everything's contextual, right, guys?
Yeah. I mean, I would say like change in my classes, but I feel like for the most part, I'm pretty much in control of my own classes. But like there are things, obviously there are external factors always, as you know. But just in general, I think it is a more general question even, you know, that like as educators at various levels, we do have like a certain responsibility that comes with this, you know.
Absolutely.
To really change worldviews. And like it's hard because you sometimes know that in order to change worldviews, you have to go against like your peacemaker kind of.
Absolutely. Because you're going to be shot down time after time after time. I think, Ben, that I really want to do more research on vulnerability, because I think that's where vulnerability comes in. Because, you know, if you understand who you are as that person, like, I don't like conflict. But if making some kind of positive difference and positive change is that important to you, then you have to be vulnerable enough to go, okay, I'm scared that I'm going to create conflict here. That's fine. I'm going to be friends with that fear of conflict. I really like, I've told my students in some of their classes, Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a book on creativity. She's the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, which was like this schmaltzy book that became a movie, but she's a great writer. And she said when she embarks on a creative process, she knows that she's going to be scared. And so she looks at it like as a road trip. And fear is going to come along, and that's just the way it is. But fear has to sit in the back seat, and fear can't guide the directions, and fear can't pick the music. But fear is there. So, and I think that's a really good image. It works for me to go, okay, I'm scared. I'm going to hate to create this hubbub, but I'm going to do it because, damn it, this is important to me. And I'm going to just take this risk. And you're going to get hurt, and you're going to have conflict, and you're going to be uncomfortable. But, you know, there were only a very few times that I actually bailed on things because I was so uncomfortable. And the rest of the time, it's kind of like, okay, you guys don't laugh. I'm reading a book now called Warrior Goddess Training. But it's about owning your power, right? You have power, and it looks different for everybody, but you know, you own the power that you can, and you do what you can, understanding that you're going to create conflict and you're going to be uncomfortable, and that's the risk you take. So that's my best answer for that. I would love to have conversation.
I asked this.
I would love to have conversation with you, right? Let's do that. Okay. It's good to see you.
We have a couple more questions. So, Brian?
Yeah, so kind of along the same vein, but sort of on the opposite side of kind of the conflict thing. Do you have any advice for, so there's a lot of inequity where I teach. And, you know, I'm head director of my high school, so I kind of have control over that little corner. Mm-hmm. But on a macro scale, there's a lot of stuff going on. And especially this year, you know, I took on more responsibility with fine arts chair and stuff like that. So I've really been going out and advocating for teachers and stuff. But I'm struggling with how to know how much to push, you know, how to approach. I'm not afraid of conflict because that's sort of just
right.
Subversive. But you know, how do you navigate these like systems of power that have inequity ingrained in them for a long time, especially when there are a lot of people in high places that either don't seem to know how or don't care enough. No one being outright terrible, but just people who aren't really willing to do these things. Like how do you navigate these things without throwing away your job, which I've come close to. I didn't.
I'll bet you have.
Yeah, because I was very upset.
Knowing you.
But I just want to know, like, how do you learn to navigate that, and what do you kind of watch? Do you have any tips for like what to kind of watch for, how to approach these things, venues that, you know, maybe don't come off as aggressive, because I never want to do that, of course, in these things. But
the first thing that I would do is to get my community behind me. So parents, and I know you have been in challenging settings, but, and we can certainly talk about this later because I've got a lot of ideas for you. But if you can get the community behind you, they have power. And the administration will often listen if it's done in the right way, right? So you endear yourself to the families of your students. You endear yourself to places within your community, like the bank, the hospital. You go perform for them. You create community partnerships with them. That's the first thing that I would do. Because if you just try to push against the administration, they will just bow up and push back, and it's just not going to work. And the other thing that I'm going to do is we have a graduate from our master's in music education program. She teaches I think in Pflugerville, and her name is Francesca Mia. And she has become very active as an advocate for teachers. She's advocate within teacher organizations. And I'm going to give her your name, and I'm going to give you her name. I'll give you her name and give her your name on Facebook so that you can get in with her. You need to build a community of like-minded people around you. You cannot do this by yourself. It will not go well. So that's my advice. You need to have community around you. And so there's several communities, your local community, your parents, your businesses, your nonprofit organizations, the movers and shakers within your community, the Latino parents, and then you look for people who are doing what you want to do. And Francesca is one of those people. So I'm going to put you in touch with her. Okay. And that will be helpful. And we can talk later too. It's really good to see you.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll do our Zoom applause or just wave or something online to thanks Dr. Emmanuel for being with us tonight. So awesome just to hear you speak and your face actually after so long. It's just wonderful being with you tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Emmanuel, and that's it. Good night.
Oh my goodness, this was I cannot tell you how good this makes me feel just to interact with you guys. And I wish I could visit with every single one of you individually, but contact me on Facebook and I would love to carry on conversation and just catch up with you so I know how you're doing. Thank you so much for having me, you and NTMEA. And bye everybody. So good to see you.
Bye, Dr. Emmanuel. Miss you.
Bye,
Bye.
Dr. Emmanuel.
Bye, guys. Thank you, Shauna.
Be safe out there.
Okay, always. Thank you.